Yeah, well, thanks for being so vulnerable and open with that. And for those folks who are listening, and there's so many people that struggle with eating disorders, and it's not something talked about very openly. And it's
Mhm.
disappointing because, I mean, I'll say I still struggle occasionally with eating disorder stuff, and in particular, working with Marissa, who's on Dr. T's team.
Mhm.
She had to keep reminding me, Holly, you're an athlete. You need to eat like an athlete, which means this much protein. And for some reason, you know, related to that eating disorder, I was struggling with that. So I worked with my therapist, who's wonderful as well. Welcome to Inspiration Contagion, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each interview spotlights transformational business leaders, their stories, challenges, and advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. Learn how you too can achieve peak performance, build more revenue, and lead the legacy you were meant to lead. Welcome back. This is episode 95 of Inspiration Contagion. And this week I have a new guest. Her name is Dr. T, or Dr. Theresa Larson. She is a leading expert and advocate for well being and strength across both personal and professional domains. She's the founder of Movement RX, where she and her team help individuals and organizations optimize physical and mental health. In her work, she draws from her own experience as a former Marine Corps officer who overcame several severe traumas. She is passionate about helping veterans, business leaders, and owners thrive in the face of challenges such as client attrition, employee retention, and scalability issues. Y'all, we've all had some of those, which are often linked to compromised mental or physical well being of leaders and employees. Dr. T and her team are dedicated to building a community of veterans, business leaders, and owners who are resilient, healthy, and happy in all that they do. Dr. T is on a bold mission to help over 100,000 veterans, business leaders, and owners improve their longevity and retain their people by 2030 through disrupting outdated leadership culture and truly prioritizing health and well being with their organizations. With that, welcome, Dr. T.
Thank you, Holly. That was a lovely intro.
Well, and I can purely, like, literally speak from personal experience to Dr. T, because she's both a client and I've been a client of her PT team, which has personally helped me get over a year-long shoulder injury. By the way,
Yeah.
what I led a 5-9 last night. Just say
Hell yeah. Heck yeah. That's awesome.
it. So,
Uh,
we're here to talk about inspiration. Hopefully, that introduction was inspiring enough to our listeners. But, Dr. T, I wanted to ask you what makes you an inspirational leader, or what would you call your secret sauce?
oh gosh. I think my secret sauce is my vulnerability, actually, because I'm not afraid to share some of the skeletons in my closet, if you will, or things that have really caused me struggle in the past and my growth process through it. I believe it gives people the permission to ask for help and speak up because the things that can cause us shame can hold us back. And so I think my vulnerability is my secret sauce.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. So, when I wrote my first book, Inspiration Contagion: Health Secrets for Raving Success, one of the nuggets of wisdom was like what you just shared, is that healing happens in circles, and that until we see and hear and feel how others are struggling just as much as we are, maybe not exactly in the same way, but they're facing a trauma, a challenge, a struggle, something of adversity, and that's what gives us permission to say, gosh, we're all human. We're in this together. So that's a
Yeah.
really powerful secret sauce.
Yeah, that's, what helped me realize that was it was actually when I did write my book, Warrior, which is a memoir. I didn't write it for business reasons or anything like that. It was more at the time to just like put this story out there that I needed to tell, that I felt like I must not be the only one experiencing these struggles. And there's a lot of story to tell. But when I published it, the response from people like really opened my eyes to the fact that, oh wow, I'm not the only one struggling with this. And other people are coming out of the woodwork to say, hey, the things I was embarrassed about, they're like, I have an addiction, I struggle with this. And people started to tell me they now reached out for help. And you're right, connection. I think the story, being vulnerable, that creates connection with people. And we are all very similar under the surface. Under the hood, actually, as human beings, we're not that different. I was just speaking to a scientist. He's a he runs a genomics company, if I'm even saying that correctly. Um, but like on a cellular level, we're not that much different, each of us. And so, but on the surface, we have different skin color, we do different jobs. So under, we struggle very similarly. We all want to be loved and heard and seen, and we do struggle. Everyone's struggle just looks a little different.
Yeah. So, for our listeners, if you're hearing this and you're facing a struggle, guess what? Join the Cool Kids Club with Theresa, Dr. T, and I. We are
Hmm.
just as human as you are, just as imperfect as you are. And hopefully that gives you some courage and inspiration. And kind of on that note, Dr. T, I wanted to ask you, how would you define inspiration, or what does that mean to you?
Well, inspiration is the ability to build people up that are around you, like make people better that are around you, ignite, and on a more tactical level, ignite action with people by who you are. I think, like, I believe inspiration has to come from action. It's one thing you see a lot of inspiring quotes and people saying inspiring things on social media. But what matters to me and what I've seen be the most impact is when that person, when I meet them, they inspire me by how they are as a human being, how they treat others, how they connect with you, make eye contact, what they're saying backed up by their action. And so, yeah, I think it's helping create positive action for others through your action.
I
That's what it
love
is.
that. It's interesting. So we've had almost 100 interviews at this point, and nobody's answered it quite that way, which is so fascinating. When we talk about inspiration, you think
Oh.
only so many ways to define it, but I love it's more of
I'll
the
find a different
essence.
way. Have to be
Of course
different.
you did. Of course you did. Yeah, I like that. That's the essence of that authenticity, that vulnerability that ignites somebody else's ability to step up and be brave and ask for permission, to take action, to create action and ignite that positive movement forward in
Yeah.
communities and groups and circles. Yeah, that's a beautiful definition.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, because of course we're talking about inspiring action. So if we pivot a little bit and talk about peak performance and tie it into inspired
Hmm.
action, how would you define peak performance, and how did you arrive at that definition?
Well, okay, so peak performance is basically living and being your best self. Um, and that means like you're you're cognitively, physically working at your best. Um, and peak performance isn't going to come from the need to be inspired isn't going to create peak performance. Like peak performance comes from the fundamental things that you do every day to keep yourself healthy and well so you can show up as the best version of yourself. The things that people oftentimes think it's a nice to have versus a need to have until they get sick. And so as an athlete and a professional, I played professional softball and then collegiate softball and was a Marine officer. So like peak performance, well, I didn't really sleep well during those years, to be honest. But, I trained a lot. I was, very focused on what I ate, who I was around. Um, so I could compete and be the best. And the best to me was very superficial at the time, but I had to win, I had to be in the front of the pack, I had to run faster. But when you look at it from a holistic standpoint, um, if I want to be cognitively aware and innovative each day and present to my little ones and my husband, my family, like sleeping well, eating well, whole foods, um, being mindful of what I pay attention to. How do I train the things that happen to me to include the past? How do I train myself to be calm about it versus stressed about it? Uh, and I think I mentioned sleep, but that's peak performance, doing those fundamental things correctly. Just like you as a pitcher, I practice the fundamental aspects of doing a rise ball and a drop ball and a curve ball. Like it takes practice. And I didn't feel motivated to do it all the time, but I had to keep doing it if I knew if I wanted to be better and be at the best in the game, the best I could be. But from a layman's perspective, like, yeah, you got to take care of yourself and give yourself the best shot at being the best version of yourself each day, which doesn't take much, to be honest. But that by doing that creates motivation, creates the ability to be inspired. When people don't sleep well enough, it sucks. Nobody's inspired about anything. Like, I was just talking to my husband. We were both felt like we were on our deathbeds last week with kids that were sick and we were sick. And like, it just crushes inspiration. But because I do mindfulness and meditation, right, the things to train my mind, I know this will pass. I know I will get back to a place of feeling better. But I think that's the thing that people don't realize is that you can't wait to be motivated, inspired to get to peak performance. Like you have to fundamentally work at it every day. Um, the things that take care of your mind and body so you can show up as the best version of yourself, which therefore will create the momentum of motivation and inspiration, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And what I want to kind of hone in on that Dr. T was sharing here that's really critical wisdom, especially for those of you who are listening and you're an entrepreneur or a business owner. And I mean, also, really generally for any human out there, because the world is a crazy roller coaster ride. But in particular, if you own a business, practicing your mental fitness is so key because the roller coaster never stops. Even as you climb to the top, it's still there. But the difference is that the more you have these foundational key elements that become habits and part of your identity, like Dr. T was just sharing, when you're sick and it feels like you're on your deathbed, you realize this will pass. Or when you're
Yeah.
grieving something, you recognize like you have to go through that grieving process and it's equally painful every time, but you know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. Or let's say, tax season comes and it's not great news. Instead of completely feeling like the world has dropped out from underneath you, you're like, okay, great. Let's put a plan together. We figure this out. It's not embarrassing. Mistakes happen. Misinformation is out there, and you're able to navigate that. And then for ladies who are listening, who maybe you're in perimenopause or premenopause or
Mm-hmm.
any of these things, it also helps you recognize the difference between your mood shifting because of hormones or a chemical shift from a medication you're taking, and get some distance and objectivity of saying, well, this is not me today, and I'll get back to where I am, and
Yeah.
have some space to stay happy, even though you're not quite yourself that day. So, practicing mental fitness, whether that's yoga or exercise, whatever gets you into that state of being where you're clear headed and able to focus on the right things, because our brains are trained to be on negativity bias, sadly. So, it's something we
Mm-hmm.
will always fight as humans. And so, be careful what shows you're watching. If you're having nightmares at
Yes.
night, don't watch horror films. If
Yeah.
you're struggling with mental chatter, be careful about what you're reading and the conversations that you're having. These are the simple tenets of foundational mental fitness. Now, Dr. T, I'm sure this hasn't been a perfect road. What are some of the
Mm-hmm.
challenges and obstacles that you faced on your journey to peak performance?
Well, I'll say this, peak performance is relative too. I like it's a daily commitment. Not every day am I at my peak performance, but I'm always striving for it. But yeah, the road has been less than linear. I'll just say like less than linear. And I want to feed off of something you just said because I work with a retired Navy SEAL commander, and he shares this sometimes in the talks we do together about BUDS training, basic underwater demolition training. And um, it's very rigorous, right? Just like some of the, not the same, but I've been through the basic school for the Marine Corps, which is also 6 months. Anyway, to get through training that's super rigorous and like just getting your ass kicked basically every day, and the retention is very low. um, you have to know your why. Like the guys, now the ladies can also do buds that make it have to know their why because it just sucks. Like some of the time it just sucks. Sometimes it's awesome. But that's the key with on the journey too. And working with you, Holly, has been great because it's like you got to keep your why in mind because you're going to get kicked in the face. Like Brene Brown talks about, you're in the arena. Everyone's criticizing you about your job or your life and how you should live. Yet you're the one in the arena doing it and kind of getting your ass kicked sometimes. And there's going to be rejection and there's going to be successes and you're going to learn that this doesn't work. And it just, but as long as you know why you're doing what you're doing, you'll stay the course and you'll keep going. And as you progress, the road does become less crowded, but you don't know how long that road will be. And the road is forever, really. But you need to be healthy as you grow. And for me, I learned this the hard way. I would say growing up, I was a perfectionist, always had to be the best. My mother passed when I was really young. And so I was raised by my dad and brothers, and everything was about performance. Like we had competitive games of basketball at home. I had to be the best in basketball in my high school. I was the best in softball. It was always I had to be the best. And that kind of, you know, is not easy on your self-esteem because if you didn't win a game or you weren't seen as the best, it was a problem for me. And it served me well to a degree as I went into college because I also played as a pitcher in college. I was like All American, Big East Pitcher of the Year. Like I just wanted to climb that ladder. I ended up playing for a semi-professional. It was a like a very high, the top ranked national softball team in the country, with a bunch of Olympians. I was like number 5 string pitcher with all these other Olympians, which I was fine with. But, like I had to be climbing that ladder. And yet it always came at a cost for my mental and physical health. Like I pushed myself really hard, had really significant disordered eating patterns. And mentally, I wasn't good enough unless I won. And that like kept going. And then, joined the Marine Corps, another very high pressure situation where you're going to war. And I hit my rock bottom in the Marine Corps. Like I was this female officer that could do no wrong, was highly competitive. Everyone thought of me as a fitness guru, great fit reps. And then I developed an eating disorder because that was how I felt. I needed to control how I saw myself. But really it was all the past bottled up, right? Of trying to be this perfect human, couldn't mess up. Now I was going to war and I had Marines that relied on me and I didn't want to fail them. And I didn't know how to cope with the things I was up against every day. And, but no one could see it, right? You don't get pulled over for an eating disorder, get in trouble for it. But mentally, I was on a roller coaster. And when I was deployed to Iraq, I was deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom 3 with my Marines. At night, I was a female escort for terrorists. So when the Navy SEALs would pick up a terrorist cell, I would be the one that would escort women back to their villages because I was like the most intimidating female Marine, because I was 6'1", like towered over everybody. And then during the day, I would run convoys looking for landmines or building vehicle checkpoints. And so my health was all over the place. Like it was like my dad was the one I chose to connect with the most. And it really was hard for him to listen to me over there because I was struggling so much personally. He was worried about my Marines and me when I was outside doing these, running convoys, basically in combat, right? And so there came a point where he's like, you're at war, but you're really at war with yourself. Like you need to get help, Teresa. Like the Marine Corps will always go on. And that to me at the time, I was like, no, it won't. Like I need to be here. I'm the only one that can do this job. And then, but then I started to pay attention to how I was showing up for my Marines. And even talking to my dad was heartbroken by how I was. He'd already lost his wife. Like he was just struggling with me where I was at mentally, not with what I was doing necessarily, but where I was at mentally. And I finally asked for help. So it took me a minute, but I asked for help in theater, which is in Iraq. And as you can imagine, it wasn't an easy journey home because nobody with it, people look at you like, what's wrong with you? You can't go to a buffet, you can't eat brownies, right? Like an eating disorder isn't a traumatic, I didn't get blown up, right, in Iraq, but I knew I wasn't cognitively there. And I was doing these really high pressure admissions. And so that journey home and facing my demons and getting help and fighting for help, I wrote about all this, but that was like a turning point for me to be like, I need to learn how to be healthy and lead my life. Like I need I don't want to feel this way. I was on a roller coaster of emotion, physically and emotionally, and I didn't want to be that way. And by slowing down and paying attention to what does Theresa want? What does Theresa need? What do I want to do with my life? Like, what do I want my health to look like? Really led me on this journey of inquiry and getting help. But I realized it wasn't just an arrival, it was a consistent daily commitment to putting myself first and self care first as a need to have versus a nice to have. And, since then, I've been in sobriety with my eating disorder, but I did have struggles when I first started my business. Um, when I left playing, I played a year of professional softball and then went back to school to get my doctorate in PT. I started my business right away because traditional PT didn't work for me. I knew that right away. Um, I'm kind of the black sheep of my profession, if you will. That's okay. I do love my profession, but I am the black sheep of my profession. And but I remember starting my business and like the stress of starting the business and all the ins and outs and managing people. I didn't know what to do with all that. I know, by the way, starting to have children, it was a lot. So I felt myself falling back into disordered eating and depression and anxiety. But instead of waiting until it was really bad, I got help right away and have been basically, I've made myself the principal in my business. And this was actually really wise um, info I got from my therapist, who's a mindfulness based biofeedback therapist. It's a handful, it's a mouthful. Biofeedback therapist who happened to be a mindfulness meditation coach. He reminded me of Abe Lincoln, but he told me, he's like, you're the principal in your life. If you don't work, your life doesn't work. And you need to take care of yourself for your family to work, for your business to work. Um, I can scale my business when I'm healthy. I can be innovative in my business if I'm healthy. And so it kind of was another stone, if you will, landmark outside of being medevaced from Iraq for my eating disorder of like, okay, I really need to shift how I'm running my business so it works for me. And I've been on that treadmill, if you will, or that path, not treadmill, ever since.
Yeah, well, thanks for being so vulnerable and open with that. And for those folks who are listening, and there's so many people that struggle with eating disorders, and it's not something talked about very openly. And it's disappointing because, I mean, I'll say I still struggle occasionally with eating disorder stuff, and in particular, working with Marissa, who's on Dr. T's team,
Hmm.
she had to keep reminding me, Holly, you're an athlete. You need to eat like an athlete, which means this much protein. And for some reason, related to that eating disorder, I was struggling with that. So I worked with my therapist, who's wonderful as well. And once I started actually eating the amount of protein I needed, I felt so much better. Like I didn't have cramps in my body. I had more energy and I was
Hmm.
getting less injuries. And so I didn't initially connect the dots on, oh, this is kind of falling back into that disordered eating until I was like, wait a second, you're still struggling with this. So guys and gals, I'm sharing this not to like have a therapy session, but to say that even those of us who have so-called arrived, right? You don't really ever arrive. The journey is constant.
Hmm.
We are far from perfect. And disordered eating is just like anything else. It's something that you have to maintain and can kind of creep back in very
Right.
easily. And you are not alone. And you want to make sure you have your support network, whether it's dealing with an eating disorder or it's anxiety or it's depression or it's some sort of addiction. Make sure you have your team because, like she just shared, if you don't work, your life doesn't work. And you are worth it. You have value, you have things to share. And in order to inspire others, you have to be able to walk the talk of being healthy.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean perfect, though. Like she shared earlier, it does not mean you're perfect every day. I slept
Mm.
4 hours last night, but it was one night. And it was because of crazy thunderstorms and my dog. But because it's not every night, I'm still operating at a pretty high spot. But if I didn't sleep for 3 or 4 nights, oh my gosh, I wouldn't be recording this right now. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Invest in your sleep, invest in your health, and figure out what works for you and build your support team. And if you're struggling with pain, I highly recommend Dr. T's team. They're
Hmm.
amazing. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit here, and I want to ask you, so you've talked about peak performance for yourself, the challenges and the obstacles. How have you created a culture of peak performance in your company?
Well, one, I give people room to work on themselves. So we like it's been important for me over time to bring on people who kind of walk their talk too and who have talents that are different than mine as well. But knowing like one of the biggest things is they know this coming in, like I want them to take care of themselves first and give themselves what they need, um, which gives them the freedom to be innovative and do what they do. And there's no micromanaging going on. I did micromanage early on in my career because I really didn't know how to grow a business or even recruit the right people. But most of my team now have found me through social media or some of the work I've done, and they've sought me out to work with me because of the company culture. And as we grow, that will shift. We'll have to find people. But but that's first and foremost is that we take care of the human being and give them what they need and give them the freedom to be who they are. And that means because we do a lot of presentations, they bring their personality to the presentations. But even on our phone, like since we're all virtual and we don't get together often, we always do a retreat once a year. It's virtual right now, but we'll go back to in person. But the um the meetings don't start with, okay, let's just get right into business. It's always, what are the positives of the week? What is something you want to share? What is something you want to need support with before we get into business? So there's this more friendly interaction. And before every member check in, because we have a membership platform that companies we work with, their people can come on, we always start with a meditation and ground ourselves and kind of we do this red, green, yellow light thing where we ask people, what color are you based on, are you super present, green? Are you kind of here, a little bit distracted, yellow? Or are you in the red, like super distracted? And we don't shame people for where they're at, but then at the end of our check in, then we'll check back in with what color they are and see if that's changed. So we kind of create a culture of like sandwiching self-care, connection with work in between.
I like that. Sandwiching self-care. Sounds tasty and delightful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, how cool is it? I like that check-in because we never really know what's going on in somebody's life. Before we got onto this interview, for all I know, you could have just gotten terrible news and we need to reschedule this, or you didn't sleep well, or there's so many things that can derail someone's day where they want to be present, but they can't because something just happened, or
Yeah.
somebody they love is sick. I mean, and you don't know unless you have a way to genuinely check in and a safe container for them to be honest when they check in. And that's something that's missing in a lot of places. So we talked
So,
about the company culture, but how have you then instilled that through your employee experience to optimize the customer experience to have that same groundedness?
well, that's what companies really hire us for too, is because we're in a unique space in the leadership and development space. We're kind of in a league of our own, if you will. I was connecting with a client the other day who's in academia, and it's like well-being really isn't in academia, but if you tie like leadership and development with leadership well-being, wow, you could do a lot. Um, but if we are a unique aspect of leadership and development or leadership training. And the reason why people hire us is because they know that their people need less stress in their life. They need to learn how to manage stress, have boundaries. They need to learn how to sleep better. They need to get more movement in because they're struggling with injuries, chronic injuries, or lots of sick days. Um, like law enforcement culture is just constant threats, constant things they're dealing with. So learning how to tame the mind and work through some of the things that they see and experience is really important. So I think, the fact that our company, it's really important that we live and breathe what we do, but that comes out in the way we present and the way we connect with people. People know when they're feeling heard and listened to, and that's why people invest in us, is because they feel cared for. Like most of our clients, I would say, obviously speaking has been a wonderful way to grow our business in an authentic way. But the reason we have some long-term clients that the reason they work with us is because we connect with them, we get to know them, we care about them. It's not just a business endeavor or exchange. It's like we become almost like family. And so that's I mean my team needs to be that way. That's something I want them to be. I want them to be healthy so they can deliver what they need to do and set the example that they need to for the people we're serving.
Yeah, I don't understand when people have a service-based business and they don't become fully invested in their client's success. They're not friends or like family. I don't understand that model. It's very gray
Mhm.
lines for me. They're pretty blurry because most of my clients are also my friends and part of my inner circle. So I don't really relate to that. And I completely agree. You guys are in a league of your own. I'm excited for you to help lots of companies that certainly need help to create that cultural health because it's missing. And what better time than post COVID to
Yeah.
rebuild on more firm footing? It was a wake up call. Hopefully, we learn from it. Um, so, I want to shift gears a little bit and get into the money portion of our conversation.
Mhm.
So, when have you left money on the table and what did you do to fix it?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, well, so when I first started my business, I would say leaving money on the table is a blessing in disguise in certain spaces, like letting go. Because when I first started my business, it was a physical therapy practice in San Diego. And we built out this beautiful center in downtown San Diego. It was 2,000 square feet, and it had everything you could possibly want, like a waiting room, like a nice clinic, and then we had little pop-up clinics around San Diego. But I hated going to work. Uh, and, sadly, at the time I wasn't aware enough. I was just doing what I thought I was supposed to do, like run clinics as a PT, open clinics, do one-on-one care, but I dreaded it. And it got to the point where, again, it caused me to get back in my therapist chair, working through my chronic stress that I was dealing with. And I knew we had to change, but like our company was growing, like it was improving, it was going in the direction PTs were supposed to be going with their business. But right around the time I had my first child, like my whole pregnancy, it was kind of very telling. Like my whole pregnancy was super stressful. I'd go to these pregnancy classes and everyone's like trying to connect with their baby. And I was like, I don't want to connect with my baby. I'm too stressed about work, which is really kind of sad. But that's just my reality at the time. Right? Like I didn't feel like I had the time to connect with my baby because I had all this, I didn't like where our company was going. Another reminder, like this isn't how I want to be. And so my husband and I had to really sit down and think about, because we work together, how do we want this company to go? Where do we want to go with it? And we ended up letting go of our PT practice. Like in the pandemic, it was right before the pandemic, but we started to phase out. We let go of the location that we were at, um, let someone else take over the lease and the location, and then started to phase out PT. And then the pandemic hit. The PT practice completely shut down, and then post pandemic ish started to build back up, and then we sold it. So, but we didn't sell it for very much because it was post pandemic and we're starting to build it back up. But the time and energy it took to build it back up, we could spend it on other things. And so, yes, we may have left money on the table, but it also brought us emotional freedom and physical freedom to move to Durango, where we live now, and to grow the part of the business that we're in now. So it was a huge leap, but it was also like a needed leap. So it created more emotional space to create versus, oh, let's try to build up this PT practice we don't like back to where it was and then sell it for more money. It's like, okay, we'll sell it for a little bit and then grow what we want it, what we know is needed. So that was one place that was positive. The other one, um, we during this time of murkiness in my business, I like to call it the murky times. of I also brought on a business partner who walked the talk, was the talk for a short time until he wasn't. Right? It was just it was more of an emotional decision. I'll say that for both of us. And after about a year, we decided we have to buy this guy out because this isn't going to work moving forward. Like he's not a good partner. He became more solely focused on, and I think he needed to be seen, right? He wanted to be famous, like he wanted people to see him, and the trajectory we were going didn't feel right to him. And so, you know, basically we had to dig into business money and buy him out. And I wouldn't really say that was money left on the table, but that was money well spent in a low cost, if you will, for what it was to eliminate a huge pain in the butt and really grow in the direction we wanted to go. And I'm actually grateful for that experience in a lot of ways because I learned a lot about what I need to look for in a business partner, what I need to look for in growing a business with something. It's not just like a good idea, this guy's awesome, which I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs out there have teamed with someone, you're like, wow, when it comes to work ethic, this doesn't really work. But I learned a lot about myself because the very things that I faulted him for, I was doing too. And I realized a lot about leadership at the time. Like, okay, I need to own this. I need to step up and take ownership of this business and where I want it to go. That I can't let someone else lead the way. And if I'm going to bring someone in, I don't expect someone else to deliver on my mission and vision yet because it was still new. The business was still pretty young. I need to get rid of kind of the the weak links of the business, and really be discerning on who I bring into that inner circle. So that was a very, really important time of our life, where a lot of money was going out the door for things that we didn't want, but in the end, right, we wouldn't be where we are with the freedom we have having not had that. Um,
Yeah.
and I would say that where we left money on the table before is when I didn't realize how important speaking was to grow the business. Like when I would go and give webinars or do talks, and I would never have anything to offer as follow up or follow through, which is a really, speaking such an authentic way to grow a brand, um, and grow services, I think, in a very authentic way. So that's kind of where I would leave money on the table too, until I started down the path of really leaning into speaking as a way to grow business.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing all those. So, I want to highlight a few things that Dr. T shared. Um, so, first of all, letting go. Y'all, if you're watching on YouTube, I literally have a tattoo that says let go.
That's
It's there
awesome.
for a reason. There are a lot of things where we really do need to let go. And she also shared the emotional freedom of letting go. There are certainly opportunities where we might leave money on the table, but for our emotional and spiritual sanity, it's necessary. So if that's you and you're listening to this, hopefully that message is sinking in. It's your mental stability is worth it. And then, yes, business partnerships, you guys. If you're listening to this and you're considering a partnership, you have a partnership, it's wearing on you. It's like getting married, you guys. And when you have
Yes.
to dissolve it, it's like getting divorced, y'all. It's not fun. I've been married, not in business, and divorced. I've also had a couple business partnerships that haven't worked out, and I'm pretty discerning. But also, like Dr. T shared, I learned so much and I would not have it any other way.
Yeah.
But now my business partnerships are so much more solid. And I am very careful to only invite people that are givers and they have that giver mentality. And then the last piece I want to share that she highlighted was the shift in her business. When your business is not on the roadmap and the trajectory that's aligned to the legacy and your why, you will feel it. And I can't tell you how frequently I work with business owners where on our first call, we hop on that and we realize, goodness gracious, I have built a business that is not aligned to the legacy I want.
Mm.
And so we work together on how to shift that or exit the business if necessary. So if
Yeah.
you're feeling that too, you might want to work with an expert on figuring that out because that's extremely financially, spiritually, and emotionally draining.
Work with
And
Holly.
thanks, thanks, Dr. T. All right. So my last question before we do our two wrap-up questions is what is the next shiny object that you would like to turn into a new revenue stream?
Ooh, the next shiny object. Okay. Well, the next shiny object actually is um, working with, uh, doing consulting for, so research parks. There's these research parks, right, that I just did a talk recently, and they're just wonderful, innovative cultures. They want to be, and they want to be discerning, but they also lack in some of the foundational things that we do, such as providing well spaces and things like that. So a shiny object would be growing in that space, being like the consultant for wellness and research parks. Yeah, which I will make a revenue stream out of
Oh, yeah. For
it.
those of you who are listening and you know somebody at a research park, be sure to introduce them to Dr. T because how cool would it be if we fueled our research parks, which, by the way, are the innovation centers of our
Yes,
country, to
absolutely.
actually solve big problems in our education, healthcare, infrastructure, systems, technology. So please, if you know those people, introduce them to Dr.
It's a
T.
massive shiny object, but it's like
It's a good one.
I
It's a
gotta lean
worthy
into that
cause.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
put it out there, plant that seed. So, Dr. T, we're going to do our two wrap up questions. It's been an amazing interview. What is the best one piece of advice you would share with others today?
The best one piece of advice would be when you get home, put your phone away and be present with your loved ones. And if you don't have loved ones at
Absolutely.
home, pick up the phone and call them and tell you love them, or forgive someone. But be present. Like that's something we really badly need.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the legacy you wish to leave behind?
Oh gosh, this is a good one. The legacy I wish to leave behind is, well, one, my children are my legacy too, just who they are. And the example I live is ultimately going to be helpful for them as they grow up. But I want people to know in every household, in every company, that they have a lot of power over their own health and well being. And that people, when they think of proactive wellness, proactive well being, they think of Movement RX and Dr. T.
I love it. All right. I hope you all enjoyed and got lots of ninja tips and wisdom moments from Dr. T. I sure did. Hope you took some notes and take some action. Put that phone down, connect, be present, and take action on your well-being. You
Yes.
you are worth it. And if you need help, reach out to Dr. T. If you have a company, a culture that's suffering and you need to create a zone of well-being, she is your gal. Her team is amazing. So, if you love this conversation and you want to reach out to Dr. T for professional speaking or to work with her, I will have all of her links for her website, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram in the show notes, as well as the links on YouTube. With that, thank you so much, Dr. T.
Thank you. This is awesome. I want to hear from some of you, all of you.
Absolutely. All right, to our listeners, we'll see you on our next episode. Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. If the show inspired you, I ask that you subscribe and share it with your network. Let's spread inspiration together today.